As a designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous material into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks 16 years since the Supreme Court's disastrous decision in Citizens United. The decision overturned critically important limits on political spending by corporations and billionaires. And we said it at the time, and it has come true. The decision has unleashed unprecedented spending by dark money groups on our elections. And now campaigns are often defined not by candidates' record or their ideas, but rather by their access to dark money. The wealthiest individuals and corporations can now help skew elections single-handedly by giving millions to their preferred candidate. They can block progress that they don't want to see. In fact, the world's richest man spent more than $250 million to help President Trump get elected in 2024. And let's talk about that 2024 cycle. Super PAC spent $4.5 billion. That's up from $2.3 billion in 2022, almost double in 2 years. And that's more money than the GDP of Greenland. And in the 2024 presidential election, the biggest super PACs supporting majority party nominees raked in $865 million from donors who contributed $5 million or more alone. And each year, our elections are increasingly defined not by big spenders, by the biggest spenders. Between 2010 and 2024, the percentage of federal election spending by the top 100 individual donors has jumped from 2% to almost 15%. That's 8 times as much. This has resulted in Americans losing faith in the integrity of our elections and the integrity of our democracy, because our democracy is predicated on the idea that every voice matters, regardless of how much money you have. And when the wealthy few can drown out the many, we lose sight of who we are supposed to serve. Policymaking gets overshadowed by these special interests. But after Citizens United, too often it is small groups of corporations and billionaires tipping the scales based on who serves their business interests. This can and must end. The American people have a voice, and if the majority support a candidate or a reform, that should win the day alone. We must limit super PACs, dark money, and excessive campaign spending, and we must restore trust in the political process. We must restore democracy to the way our founders intended, centered around equal access to government. And we must overturn Citizens United. We have that power. I thank you to my colleagues for joining me today and Assistant Leader Nagus for organizing today. I look forward to hearing from my many colleagues in the next hour about how we can tackle this important issue. And so now I yield to the gentlewoman from Arizona, Ms. Grijalva, for as much time as she may consume.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Subramanian. I rise today to speak about the single greatest force that continues to distort our democracy, the role of money in our politics. 16 years ago today, the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision opened the floodgates to unlimited corporate and billionaire spending in our elections, drowning out the voices of working people. The decision overturned a long-standing precedent that rooted on independent political spending by corporations and billionaires. The conservative majority embraced the idea that spending money on elections equals speech, that corporations are entitled to the same speech rights as people, giving carte blanche to corporations and billionaires to spend unlimited money. When money is allowed to dominate, it blocks progress on everything else. Private prison and immigrant detention contractors spend millions to influence elections and policy, all while people die in their facilities. 3 people have died in just the last 6 weeks at a privately run tent camp in El Paso. Fossil fuel and mining companies pour enormous sums into elections to block climate action, while communities like mine in Arizona face record heat, drought, and wildfires, and continue to deal with the devastating impact to our water and land and environment. The gun lobby spends millions to stop life-saving reforms, while my friend and Congresswoman Gabby Giffords continues fighting for common-sense gun laws so that tragedies like that massive shooting in Tucson never happen again. Nowhere is this corruption more visible than in the White House, where policy decisions are increasingly shaped by the interest of wealthy donors and corporate insiders. Literally, it feels like there is a sign in front of the White House saying, "For sale, justice for sale." We should be clear, Congress doesn't have to wait to act. We can ban members of Congress from holding and trading stock. We can pass transparency laws like the Disclose Act. Ultimately, we need to pass constitutional amendment reversing Citizens United. This is a choice between democracy that serves donors or one that serves people. The choice couldn't be clearer. 16 years after Citizens United, we need to shift the power back to everyday Americans and away from those who can write the biggest checks. It's past time we reverse course on Citizens United. It's time to act and end Citizens United. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are a lot of reforms people have proposed to overturn the damage done by Citizens United. I introduced legislation yesterday, the Campaign and Election Accountability Act, and one of the things that Citizens United did was make it easier for foreign nationals to funnel money into the U.S. elections. And now the Federal Election Campaign Act currently prohibits foreign nationals from contributing to U.S. elections and political campaigns. However, it does not prohibit Americans from assisting foreign nationals from seeking to do so. We don't know if they are wanting to donate for nefarious reasons or if they just like a candidate, but we must ensure that our elections are free and fair from foreign influence. It is a small tweak, but my bill will prohibit Americans from assisting foreign nationals who want to contribute to U.S. elections. And this way, we can all have faith that only Americans are contributing to our campaigns. And for now, this is a step in the right direction as we all work towards the larger goal of overturning Citizens United. And I hear from a lot of constituents about what is the disconnect between Washington's policies and what's happening for everyday Americans? Because Americans are living through one of the worst costs of living crises in modern history. Working families are struggling with rising expenses like healthcare and housing and utilities and groceries, and yet they have representation that seems to reflect the very wealthiest. We just passed a tax cut for the very wealthiest Americans this last summer. And people don't understand why. But if you look back at what happened with Citizens United, you realize that that influence on our campaigns and elections is why you end up with policies like that. And so this is why we have to make sure that we overturn Citizens United. And so I'm going to yield for as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Speaker, thank you for enabling us to have this opportunity to speak on the floor today. I want to thank my colleague from Virginia. He is new to the Congress, but he has already made an outsized impact during the course of his 13 months of service in this august body, taking on corruption. And I am deeply grateful to him for his efforts in that regard, not just with respect to overturning Citizens United, but tackling the corruption that has become so pervasive here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Speaker, I stand on the floor of the People's House to deliver what I believe to be an urgent message. The time to confront political corruption and clean up government is now. 16 years ago, to this very day, the Supreme Court issued its ruling in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. As you know, Mr. Speaker, that decision overturned long-standing precedent and limits on political spending by special interests. The decision created a dark money system where money speaks louder than everyday Americans. It has shifted power and influence away from everyday Americans, from the folks in our communities that we are privileged to serve, to instead these shadowy special interests that flood your television screen every evening. In my view, Citizens United undermined what it means to be a country of the people, by the people, and for the people, and above all, accountable to the people. And unfortunately, for far too long, this chamber has failed to do what needs to be done to renew the faith of the American people in our democracy. We cannot accept that. We have to do something about it. As you know, Mr. Speaker, earlier this year I introduced legislation in the form of a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution that would revoke Citizens United. It would ensure transparency through our campaign finance reform and prevent unrestrained spending and dark money in our elections. Put bluntly, it would put the power back in the hands of the American people. And I want to thank my Democratic colleagues, 73 of them, who've already co-sponsored this legislation, who are joining us tonight to be part of this effort, this clarion call, supporting the restoration of integrity, of transparency to Washington. Together, I honestly believe, with enough reformers, we can change the Congress. We can ban stock trading by members of Congress. We can end dark money in our politics. We can overturn Citizens United. We just have to have the political will to do it. I thank the gentleman from Virginia for having that will, and all of my colleagues who joined us on the floor this evening, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. I now yield to the gentlewoman from Hawaii for as much time as she may consume, Ms. Takuda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks the 15th anniversary of Citizens United. This decision did not rewrite campaign finance law. It sold our democracy to the highest bidder. Before Citizens United, elections were about persuading voters. After it, they became about courting billionaires. As of 2025, there are 2,502 super PACs. For the 2024 election, they've taken in over $5 billion, much of it dark money, much of it undisclosed, and much of it designed to drown out the voices of everyday Americans. Let's be clear. This isn't free speech. This is legalized corruption. Super PACs were supposedly independent, but in reality, they've become shadow campaigns, circumventing coordination laws, allowing unlimited, often anonymous contributions, and turning elections into auctions. And what does that buy you? For a bargain price of $300 million, Elon Musk bought a gilded seat inside the federal government and walked away with billions in contracts from the very agencies he later doged. It's a parasitic, paid-to-play system disguised as innovation. Meanwhile, teachers, nurses, construction workers, police officers pay higher effective tax rates than private equity executives. Families struggle with housing costs, health care, child care, while Congress stalls, paralyzed by fear of angering the super PACs that bankroll campaigns. That fear is the point. Dark money doesn't just influence policy, it changes behavior. It makes members of Congress think twice before doing the right thing because they know one vote could trigger a massive smear campaign. The losers aren't Democrats or Republicans. The losers in all of this are the American people, across parties, across states, whose voices are being drowned out. 15 years later, the verdict is in. Citizens United has sold out our democracy and all Americans across the country. It's past time to end the era where billionaires buy access, buy silence, and buy power. Congress must act, close the coordination loopholes, rein in the super PACs, and restore the simplest idea that in America, people, not money, govern. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. A lot of great points there. I now yield to the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fauci.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, today marks 16 years since the Supreme Court handed down its disastrous Citizens United decision, a ruling that opened the floodgates to unlimited corporate money in our elections and fundamentally distorted our democracy. By discarding decades of precedent, the Supreme Court declared that unlimited spending in elections poses no threat to our democratic system and that corporations are entitled to the same political rights as the people whose lives are governed by the outcomes of those decisions. What emerged from this transfer of power was an election system that no longer depends primarily on voters, but rather on outside entities whose sole purpose is to spend unlimited money, often without public accountability, to influence who holds power and how that power is used. Since Citizens United, we have watched a parallel political system take shape, one dominated by super PACs and dark money organizations that can raise and spend unlimited sums and operate with fewer rules, less transparency, and the ability to determine election outcomes long before voters cast a ballot. A small number of wealthy donors now wield influence far out of proportion to the voters they seek to affect. This concentration of power has consequences for how this institution functions. When unlimited outside spending can be deployed against a single vote, it shapes the decisions lawmakers can take. It narrows the range of feasibility policy. It rewards delay and protects entrenched interests, often at the expense of the public's priorities. Meanwhile, Americans face one of the most pressing affordability crises in decades. Healthcare, housing, childcare, energy, and grocery costs are all rising, yet policies that could provide immediate relief are repeatedly stalled. At the same time, industries that benefit from higher costs or weaker enforcement continue to earn record profits and protect their advantage with unlimited political spending. And although Citizens United did not create these problems, it enabled them to persist and grow. While the long-term goal must be to overturn Citizens United through a constitutional amendment, Congress has the power and the responsibility to act immediately to limit its damage. The American people deserve a government that answers to them. 16 years of Citizens United is long enough. We must restore accountability, strengthen transparency, and defend the voice of every voter. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. A lot of great points. And the concentration of political power has often led to the concentration of wealth in this country. And so now I yield to the gentleman from California, Mr. Desaulniers, for as much time as he may consume.
First, I want to thank the gentleman from Virginia for giving me this opportunity, but also for your leadership. This is such an important discussion for Americans, and I think this was for years to take away their power and place it in the hands of the wealthiest and unfortunately the most obscenely greedy people in this country who think only they have the wisdom to govern. The opportunity to highlight how Citizens United has impacted not just the political landscape, and indeed this room, but also our nation, our culture, and certainly our economy. With the floodgates opened by the Supreme Court in 2010, corporations and billionaires can now make unlimited independent expenditures. As a result, the wealthy few have even more outsized influence on our politics. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, the 2017 Trump tax cuts overwhelmingly favored the rich. The lowest 20% of earners got an average tax break of only $70, while the top 1% of earners received over $61,000 in tax breaks, and the top 10th of a percent saw over $250,000 of tax breaks. This is on top of the situation where we have the largest concentration of wealth in the history of this country, making it more obscenely unfair. Those same tax cuts toward the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%, while a bipartisan policy center projected that this will increase the federal deficit by almost $1 trillion by fiscal year 2027. Unsurprisingly, during the same period, billionaire spending on presidential elections has skyrocketed, increasing from a total of $16 million before Citizens United was passed to over $2.6 billion in the years since Citizens United. What naive person would think that these people who contributed these obscene amounts of money did it for altruistic purposes? No, they did it for themselves. And this obscene greed, how much do they need? When billionaires and corporations are able to spend unlimited amounts to influence the results of our elections, our elected officials are, in turn, unfortunately, more likely to respond by passing legislation that benefits corporations and the richest Americans while making life more expensive for middle-class Americans. If you're surprised about affordability, Mr. President, this is how real Americans have to live because of your policies and the people who preceded you. Our nation and the world are experiencing record levels of income inequality, and the impacts of Citizens United and other handouts to the obscenely rich and the powerful are only making it worse. It's past time that we change course and correct what has created this inequality. Compare it to the years of another Republican president, Dwight David Eisenhower, when we had the largest middle class in the country, in the world, in our history. And ironically, President Eisenhower said about working people in the labor movement, only a fool, this is President Eisenhower, would come between an American worker and their ability to organize for other workers. American voters deserve representatives who will bring about positive change, not just cater to the interests of these obscenely wealthy donors and megacorporations. I'm glad to be here today, and again, thank my colleague for doing this. In my belief that America is about representing all of us, ordinary people as well as wealthy people. After all, are we a country of, by, and for Americans, or of, by, and for the obscenely wealthy? Thank you, sir. Thank you for doing this. I yield back.
Thank you. I now yield to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Landsman, for as much time as he may consume.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I believe that the greatest issue that we face in this country is the extreme concentration of wealth and power at the very top. It is unprecedented and dangerous. At the end of 2024, the 65 million Americans with the least amount of wealth had about $4 trillion in wealth combined. The 905 billionaires at the end of 2024 had nearly $8 trillion in wealth. So put it another way, 900 people have nearly twice as much wealth as 65 million Americans. 900 people is the size of a small high school. 65 million is almost the population of the entire Midwest. And 8 trillion is double what every American owes in student loans, car loans, credit cards, and nearly every other type of debt combined, meaning that these 905 billionaires could pay for everyone's debt in the United States and still be super rich. Now, this may have gotten worse in 2025, in large part because of the one big beautiful bill that spent trillions and trillions of dollars on tax cuts for the super wealthy at the expense of millions and millions of Americans. They cut over $1 trillion in health care. 15 million Americans are going to lose their health care to pay for tax cuts for the super wealthy. So that concentration of wealth and power got worse, probably worse in one single year, in one single vote, than any other time in American history. During my lifetime, since I was born, CEO pay has increased by over 1,000%, while worker pay has increased by 25%. On average, right now, a CEO makes more in a single day than a worker does in an entire year. The concentration of wealth and power has given a small group of super elites the ability to make all the big decisions in this country, and they've used their power and influence to further rig our economy and politics to benefit themselves at the expense of everyone else. This obviously got infinitely worse with Citizens United. And this was a multi-decade campaign that big corporations and the super wealthy paid for to get a Supreme Court that would change the law so that they could spend whatever they wanted on their politicians. Now they can spend unlimited amounts of money on elections, on campaigns, on politicians, and they don't have to report any of it. Every major issue in this country, whether it's the attacks on our democracy, the issues with our economy, healthcare, it all can be traced back to the concentration of wealth and power and Citizens United. It's why the American dream is out of touch for the vast majority of Americans by nearly every measure. Look no further than the fact that most Americans can no longer buy a home, and 1 in 4 Americans have $0 saved for retirement. This is a crisis and a moment of reckoning. All of the money is stuck at the top. And our big mission, the thing that our generation has to do, is reclaim that money, or that power and wealth back for the American people. That's the number one thing. At the end of the day, our generation has to reclaim that power and wealth on behalf of the American people. Return it to them. First thing we have to do is fix our democracy and politics, returning power back to the people. This includes banning dark money and reversing Citizens United, ending voter suppression, and eliminating partisan gerrymandering once and for all. It also includes government reforms to actually get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, and corruption of every kind. Once power is back with folks, we will be able to address once power is back with people, we will be able to address all the other major issues in our country. We will have leaders who are willing to fix our broken economy and overhaul our tax code so that hard work pays off for every American. Fixing the tax code does two things. One, it will ensure that the super wealthy and big corporations pay all their taxes just like the rest of us. And two, it will generate trillions of dollars that will be invested back in the American people. Trillions to help people with housing and health care and education. It will help us pay down the debt. It will fix nearly everything that is broken in this country. The country belongs to all of us, not just the super wealthy. And reversing Citizens United will allow us to fundamentally improve the lives of every American, fundamentally improve our economy. So I want to thank the gentleman for leading this work, and I appreciate you allowing me to say a few words, and I yield back.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And Again, it's this cycle, the concentration of wealth, and because of Citizens United has led to the concentration of political power, leading to even more concentration of wealth. And it's just this cycle that Citizens United has created that is hurting our country and leading to record income inequality. And it's reflected in some of the policies that we've passed that have hurt everyday Americans, working Americans. And while the long-term goal is to overturn Citizens United, certainly through a constitutional amendment. That is a very difficult goal, but certainly one that we should aspire to. Congress does have the power to act immediately to curb some of its damage. We're talking about bills like the Freedom to Vote Act, the Disclose Act, the Protecting Our Democracy Act, and the Ban Corporate PACs Act. These bills will help reduce and mitigate the influence of big money and strengthen transparency around it and limit corporate power. This is a moment to draw a line between a political system that serves donors and one that serves the American people. That's what we really want in the end, is to serve the American people. And so, you just look back at the past couple of decades since Citizens United, since 2010. I mean, in 2010, that cycle, $3.6 billion in total costs of federal elections, by-election cycle. And then it goes up to $6.3 billion. And then by 2022, it's at $8.9 billion. And by 2024, it's at $15.9 billion. This past cycle was a record high. And again, all of that is because of Citizens United and because of the ability to just flood these PACs, these super PACs, dark money super PACs, with as much money as you want, with no accountability. And now there's ways to hide some of these donations as well. And so we have to do something. We have to act now. Otherwise, this is going to continue to the cycle of pain for so many Americans. And so I want to now yield to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Stansberry, for as much time as she may consume.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 16 years ago, today, the Supreme Court decided in the Citizens United decision to put our democracy up for sale. Well, I'm here today to say, Mr. Speaker, democracy is not for sale, and it is time to get big money out of politics, to end Citizens United, and to hold this administration, this Congress, and this judiciary accountable. Because what we have seen is the fundamental erosion of our democratic system, and at the rotten root of it all is the influence of big money in politics. Because Citizens United opened the door for corporations and billionaires to dump untold sums of money onto our elections anonymously, calling corporations people. Mr. Speaker, corporations are not people. The American people are who we represent, not the corporations, not the billionaires, not the wealthy donors, and not the individuals who are trying to buy and sell our democracy. Now, we know that right now, corruption and the buying of elections are having a profound influence on what we are seeing in this country. We are watching as a United States president is selling out the United States out from under the American people, offering pardons for millions of dollars to his friends, letting dangerous individuals back onto the streets, individuals who have committed white-collar crimes, all for the very cheap sum of giving him a few $1 million or a few $1 billion in his cryptocurrency. Selling our secrets and our national security to foreign adversaries by allowing them to deposit sums of money into his cryptocurrency, by giving him gifts like multi-million-dollar jets, and yes, even allowing him to potentially launder money in a foreign bank account in Qatar from oil he stole using the American taxpayers' dollars and the U.S. military. Because President Trump is showing what happens when you let big money buy politics. In fact, He told Big Oil just last year that if they gave him $1 billion in campaign funds, he would deliver. Well, promises made, promises kept. Literally invading a foreign country to take their oil. Here in this chamber just a few days ago, a member of leadership on the opposite side of the aisle was discovered that her husband had been trading in stocks. While we are considering a stock trading ban right now in this House. This is corruption in action. While we have a judiciary across the street who is considering undermining the fundamental voting rights of the American people. After their wealthy donors took them on trips and involved them in this vast scheme over the last several years to fundamentally remake America, the same donors who donated to Donald Trump, who donated to our friends across the aisle, and who are also making money hand over fist on the stock market right now. This is what comes from Citizens United. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I am absolutely dedicated to fighting to make sure that we get big money out of politics, that we end Citizens United, and when we take back the House, because, Mr. Speaker, we will take back the House, I guarantee you that on day one, our top priority will be to root this corruption and this rot out of the federal government. So it's time to get big money out of politics, and I am here for the fight. I yield back.
Thank you to my colleague. Thank you to all of the speakers today. I just want to say that this is the 16th anniversary of Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. It was a 5-4 ruling. And this decision overturned a long-standing precedent that we had in this country, where we had clearly established limits on independent political spending by corporations and billionaires. And it was working. I mean, for many years, political spending had essentially flattened out. Sometimes it had gone down when it comes to the contributions of billionaires and the largest corporations. And we were able to have an election system where, there was a lot of money in the system, but not to where we are today, where it's completely engulfed all of our actions and all of our campaigns. And there's been so much damage caused by Citizens United. Many of my colleagues explained today. We're talking about wealthy donors now dictating election outcomes potentially with the amount of money they can flood into these elections. Americans have less information about who's influencing those campaigns and politicians. A lot of times it's very easy to hide your contributions to these PACs and super PACs. And so because of that, we see a system now where we don't even know where the money's coming from. We see the names of some of these cleverly named PACs in the disclosures, but you can have PACs hiding PACs. You can have chains of money. And that's why I felt the need to even try to address the influence of foreign money, because it's become easier than ever for a foreign entity to also infiltrate our elections. And, these reforms that we're talking about here, campaign finance reform, they have broad support from the American people across both sides of the aisle. In fact, they have felt that they cannot trust DC, they cannot trust this administration, and they can't even trust this body, Congress, because of the influence of all this money in our politics today, in our campaigns today. And the dynamics show up repeatedly in the issues that we're working on that directly affect people's lives. We're talking about our efforts to lower prescription drug costs and healthcare costs, and how we see all the money spent by some of those groups to prevent legislation that will help the American people. We're talking about, my colleague from New Mexico talked about the influence of oil and gas and that money on trying to address the environment and clean air and clean water and climate change. You're talking about efforts that we're trying to make to crack down on corporate price gouging and how it's become incredibly difficult and almost an uphill battle when it comes to some price gouging efforts because of the influence of all of this money on our politics. And then you're talking about strengthening worker protections as well. We're becoming a country that is not looking out for the average worker. And we're talking about times where, workers are seeing their wages flatten and lower if you take into account inflation and the increase in income inequality as a result of it. And so people are fed up, and they understand that part of the reason why they can't trust the policies coming from Washington, D.C. is because of the influence of this money on our policymaking and elections, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop. And, unlimited outside spending gives special interests the ability to threaten lawmakers with massive advertising campaigns and well-funded challengers and relentless negative messaging. And I've been through it. I know many of our colleagues have been through it, where these super PACs come in and they change the dynamics of an election with millions and millions of dollars. And, the one bit of good news is that many of us, like me, are here still. We fought that uphill battle and we won it. But now we have to look at what's going to happen in the future. What kind of political system will our kids have to endure? Will they feel like they have a voice in our politics today? Or will they feel like they are, seeing a political system that is corrupted by all this money? And it's about which side will be able to spend the millions of dollars to win, not which side has the right policies and right things for the American people and to serve the American people. And so this is all about service. This is not about money and the influence of the most wealthy corporations and groups. And so we've outlined a lot of different ways that we can address this. Again, I go back to the Freedom to Vote Act and the Disclose Act and the Protecting Our Democracy Act and the Ban Corporate PACs Act. We can work on this right now. Even if you don't think we have the votes to overturn Citizens United, we should still try. We should still put it on the floor and put it up for a vote. But, in the 16 years that we have had Citizens United go into effect, we see our airwaves and our mailboxes, our inboxes, and our digital media influenced by all this money. And one of our country's core principles is that every citizen has a vote and that every citizen has a voice, and regardless of how much money you have. And when you allow unlimited money to come into our campaign system, those individual voices are drowned out. And so a lot of people feel the despair of not having a voice in our politics today. And a lot of that is because of Citizens United. We have lost something that has made our democracy special in some ways. And, I think today's, the folks that spoke up today have really made a lot of good points about how many of us feel the anger of what's going on, but we are committed. We are committed to getting this dark money out of politics. And this does not have to be a partisan issue. Never has to be. And I know there are folks on both sides of the aisle that want to do this. And, some of my colleagues talked about the corruption today in our politics and how there's this perception of corruption and there's the reality of corruption. And they're talking about what's happened in this administration as well and all the corruption that has happened in this administration. And it's disheartening to see some of the stories that we see every week about how foreign governments are influencing our policies now. And foreign leaders and foreign wealthy people and wealthy corporations can easily buy some of our policy making. That's the appearance, and that's the reality in some cases. And so that needs to stop. We need to do something about it. We need to do something now. And so, again, we are all committed to making sure that people trust our institutions and they trust our Congress. And so I want to thank my colleagues today for speaking up and being willing to take on this fight. This is not an easy fight. It's the easy thing to do. It's just to go with the flow and go along with the system that we have today. But instead, my colleagues have decided to speak up. And my colleagues have decided that they will not accept the status quo. And I know many people were not able to come today. I know we have a few more still on their way. But the reality is, my colleagues understand that the system is not good for our democracy. It's not good for our country. And it's not good for the perception of this institution or the reality of this institution. And so we have to continue to keep fighting. If we look at the cycles, the 2010 cycle, as I mentioned before, the top 100 individual donors spent 2.1% of all spending in 2010. And by 2024, it was 15%. And so if you extrapolate that, by 2038, we're going to have about half of our spending could end up being from the top 100 individual donors. I mean, that's sort of where we're headed right now, where you're going to have such a concentration of wealth. And there are countries that have that right now, today. And those democracies are not functioning democracies. Some of them don't even call themselves democracies anymore, or don't even try to consider themselves democracies, where you have the few governing the rest. And when you see some of the spending that we have today, again, the 2000 cycle had $18 million in spending. The 2004 cycle had $13 million in spending. 2008 cycle, $16 million. And so, it kind of leveled off, right? And then you look at the 2012 cycle, after Citizens United, $231 million in spending. And then the 2016 cycle, $682 million in spending. And then by the 2020 cycle, we're in the billions now, $1.2 billion. And we're at a point now where you need $1 billion to run for president at this point. I mean, the 2024 cycle was $2.6 billion. I think we're at a point now where some of our elections are the money is just outrageous. And, people want to feel trust in our institutions and our systems. But, you want to get to a place where you can do that. But what we're experiencing now is affecting our policymaking. It's affecting every single part of the way this institution runs today. And so the other thing is we at least want disclosure, right? And that's why I've talked about some of the bills that we can do right now, like the Disclose Act, because at least what we could have is more clear understandings of where the money is coming from and a better ability to follow the money so that the American people can understand who's paying for that commercial that they keep seeing on TV, right? Is it actually the PAC? Who paid for that ad? And where's the money coming from? What do they want? And then who received that money, right? It is very unclear right now to a lot of people. And so there's a lot of issues right now that we can solve even without overturning Citizens United, although overturning Citizens United is our main goal. But I think in the end, we have an opportunity and we have to act now. We can't wait. And so I want to now yield to the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, for as much time as she may consume.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it. Mr. Speaker, 16 years ago, the Supreme Court overturned a long-standing precedent that protected working families' voices in our democracy. By embracing this idea that corporations are entitled to the same speech rights as people, the Supreme Court opened the floodgates to unchecked corporate influence and governance and billionaire political spending. The Supreme Court effectively put a price tag on representation. They put a price tag on the seats of this chamber, and they put a price tag on our democracy. But today, I want to make sure that I am clear in the House of Representatives. Our democracy is not for sale. Our democracy is weaker when the voices of Black, brown, and middle low-income folks are drowned out by the volumes of ads $1 million can buy. Since the Citizens United decision, outside spending by super PACs and dark money groups has exploded at every single level of government. The Trump administration, Republicans in Congress are a clear example. We know that to make Trump and their billionaire bosses happy, my colleagues, they've been bought by big corporate money, will leave working people unhoused. They'll leave them foreclosed. They'll leave them detained, deported, poor, hungry, sick, uninsured, and drowning, literally and figuratively. It is why it's time we prioritize a democracy that works for working people, one where Donald, where Elon, where Jeff, and all these billionaires pay their fair share. Their money has to be out of our elections and out of the White House, and their hands out of the working people's pockets and off our services, where our rights and our freedoms mean working people have every single thing they need to thrive. We need bold legislative action if we're going to end corruption and get big money out of politics and get their corporate influence out of our communities. And that is why last year I filed the Campaign Transparency Act and the Stop the Super PAC Candidate Coordination Act and supported the Abolishing Super PACs Act. And why today, as we're here during Special Order Hour, I'm proud to announce that I will be also introducing the Lobbyist Loophole Closure Act with Reps. Mullen and Williams. The bill addresses the loopholes created by the Lobbyist Disclosure Act. The bill includes provisions to increase transparency and accountability by broadening the definition of lobbying and by also lowering the time threshold for registration. I want to close by thanking End Citizens United and its president, Tiffany Mueller, for all the work that they're doing to ensure that that we get dark money out of politics and that we ensure a democracy by the people, for the people. It is time we end this, and I know that collectively we can do it. With that, I yield back to the congressman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we'll definitely look into that bill and more solutions that we can act on right now. And while we try to overturn Citizens United, I want to thank all the speakers today. I want to thank Representative Neguse for helping organize this, and thank my staff, including Matt Fisher, for helping get everyone together today. I'll yield back to the chair. Thank you.
The gentleman yields. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president and to direct their remarks to the chair.